horrific for anybody directly involved. And, of course, you know, you'll be watching glued to hope against hope, but with hypothermia risk and all those other factors, the divers and everybody involved in this is going to be up against it, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, what terrible news to wake up to. And,
quite.
And obviously our thoughts and prayers and hopes are with that there are survivors, and our thoughts are with the loved ones who've potentially lost, the families who've potentially lost loved ones. I mean, look, it's a developing story. We'll get more news throughout the day, but just what absolutely horrific.
Shocking.
I cannot imagine.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
I think what Alex said about it changing how the Americans are going to approach domestic flights, it was really interesting, because, I mean, it's such a huge country, and if you live there, as I've done, you use domestic flights all the time.
Yeah.
Like buses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, going from New York to Washington or to the West Coast or the heartland. These are very common flights that ordinary people,
and, of course,
everyday people
frequently
take.
carrying very significant people to government.
Yes.
With no suggestion in any way in this occasion, but, you know, which always raises questions when anything's involved, doesn't it?
It's terrifying and very sad.
And you have both flown in and out of Washington, Ronald Reagan Airport in Washington. You remember it as being quite a hairy approach.
Yeah, I mean, I remember it was sort of specific, odd times. I mean, I went there twice as a government minister. Actually, when I went as Chancellor, I flew into New York and then took the train. But as business secretary, I flew into Washington a couple of times. And yeah, it was quite a steep approach. But as Alex said, I think there are lots of city airports
that have
that problem, because you've got a built-up area and you've got thousands, if not millions, of people living underneath.
Look, it seems strangely uncomfortable, but it is a fact that, you know, before we saw these horrific events overnight, we were going to be talking about an airport in a very different way. We were talking about Heathrow as our focus, and, you know, the promise that this was a big kickstart for growth, and Rachel Reeves says the concerns for those people living by on their impact. But beside all of that, because there isn't a direct relation in a way, there are going to be people that are thinking, where on earth is this going to be a benefit to all of us living here?
Well, look, I mean, the announcement that we want to see a third runway at Heathrow is obviously the most eye-catching bit of the package yesterday that Rachel Reeves outlined, and I've always been in favour of Heathrow expansion.
How have you, Jonathan? Why? Is it because you don't live there?
No, because I believe it's good for jobs. I think it's our hub airport, and we are losing out to other airports in Europe. I think we've got to get onto it. I voted for it when it last came to Parliament.
So you both are in favour of the expansion?
We both voted. I mean, I think there was quite a lot of cross-party consensus when it came up, I think, in 2017 or 16. I think it was 17. And we decided to vote for it. But then, of course, the pandemic happened and nothing got done. And my issue with this, I mean, I was a constituency MP for Spelthorne, which is just to the south of the airport. And, of course, lots and lots of people, as Jonathan said, I think it deployed about 77,000 people. And not only that, it was the leading international airport. When I became an MP there, it was in 2010, it was still the leading international airport. Now I think Dubai is sort of creeping up on it and may have even overtaken it. So again, I think the economic argument was very compelling.
So what is the economic argument specifically for people waking up thinking, I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford my mortgage? 100,000 jobs, great, but not millions of jobs.
No.
You know, and not... When do you think we'll see the benefit of it?
So the initial economic argument is that as the world gets richer, as people, you know, there's a middle class in China that's expanding by millions every year, and they want to fly, they want to go and see places. And one of the places they might want to see is London. Now, if they can't get to London, or it's difficult to get to London...
They can get to London.
No, but it's difficult.
I mean, this might not even start, Jonathan, for 5 years, 10 years...
Can I just finish on that?
Yes, you can.
So you need to have an international hub. The argument is you need to have an international hub for people to come in and, you know, Brits to fly out. That facilitates international trade. There are freight flights as well.
But no one's saying get rid of Heathrow.
No, but you want to expand it. As the global economy expands, airport capacity has to match it in some way. Your second point about the time is right, because you're not going to get even if the spade was in the ground tomorrow, the flight wouldn't take off for 10 or 15 years. You're not going to see this Parliament any growth from the expansion.
Is that true, Jonathan?
I mean, that's right. I mean, the Heathrow project is going to take a long time. But the key thing is it's not just about Heathrow, what was announced yesterday. There's a big redevelopment of Old Trafford, where Man United play. They're a football team who used to win trophies, don't tend to anymore.
They used to be good, yeah. I'm old enough to remember when they were good, yeah.
You know, better transport links in places like Oxford and Cambridge. That's really important because not only are they two of the world's leading universities, it's really good for life sciences, investment in spin-off companies that will create jobs. We're looking at transport links in other parts of the country. Bringing that package together helps grow the economy, and if you get the economy motoring,
so why does it help grow the economy
standards.
now? Just explain, if you're into it. Because suddenly people feel good. Because I don't think anybody individually feels better about that. No. Because what they're thinking is when will I see this? You know, instantly, winter fuel payments gone. Instantly, fear about getting a new mortgage or rents increasing. What yesterday is going to make us feel richer by the end of 2025?
Well, sure, but that's not really how the economy works. If you're creating good, well-paid jobs and investing in transport links, investing in regeneration projects, improves the overall economic picture in particular areas. That raises the economic growth overall.
But Kate's point, I'm afraid, is very pertinent because I agree with you. I think we've got to have long-term vision and have infrastructure and all of that investment. But for 2025, that's not gonna shift the dial this year. And what will happen? The OBR, you know, the forecast will be revised down almost certainly, and then the Chancellor will have that, you know, devil's choice really between cutting spending or raising taxes. Because she said specifically she's not going to borrow any more money. She was very clear about that. And that's a very difficult situation to be in.
If you agree with that, you know, what people can remember for a big infrastructure project most strongly in their mind is HS2, which cost a fortune and ultimately the Conservative government just scrapped.
Well, I was against scrapping it because, you know, if you look around London or any of our big cities, a lot of the infrastructure was built decades ago. And we still use it. We still use, you know, the underground... Parts of the underground were built 150 years ago. And you're trying to do long-term investment, which will benefit future generations. And I personally think it was a shame that we scrapped HS2.
I mean, one of the problems we've had in this country, though, we've got so much bureaucracy and red tape around these big infrastructure projects, which hold them up for sometimes for donkey's years, and they get blocked for the most ludicrous of reasons sometimes. And this government is saying...
like newts and bats and wasps.
All
of that
and this government is saying it wants to sweep it away, it wants to hack away at it, it's got the political will to do that, it's got enough MPs to get it through Parliament.
Right.
So, look, this is what Rachel Reeves is saying she's going to do. The proof will be in the pudding. I hope she does get on with it, because I want to see the spades in the ground and the cranes in the sky.
We've been saying this for years.
Yeah.
I mean, Jonathan was in Parliament almost as long as I was, and we were debating it all through the 14 years we're in government. And on Heathrow specifically, the government white paper saying we should have a third runway first came out in 2003. So for 22 years, we've been debating this issue, and we haven't really got anywhere with it.
Well, we have questions for the Chancellor, and she will be joining us live on the programme at about 8:30 this morning for an extended interview. So we look forward to hearing her answers to them. Let's talk about a couple of other things. What are we going to do about this burgeoning retail crime in this country? When I say retail crime, I'm not actually talking about the huge rise in the number of cases of shoplifting. I'm talking about people being assaulted in shops, people being threatened, people being terrorised, actually, sometimes, by gangs who are going in.
Yeah, I mean, this is a massive, massive problem. And I think too often the issue of shoplifting slightly gets dismissed and people sort of think it's not a sort of serious crime. It is a serious crime. When I was an MP, I would obviously visit local... smaller smaller co-op shops, smaller Tesco shops, and talk to the staff who would tell me that essentially gangs would show up in a minivan, come in, just wipe all the bottles of drink, all the cigarettes off, and they would go off again. The police wouldn't turn up to investigate.
That was the issue.
Absolutely terrifying. My mate Richard Walker, who runs Iceland Supermarkets, I'm sure he's been on your show
many times. Yeah.
He makes the point he's not even allowed to share pictures of the shoplifters with his various stores because that contravenes data protection laws. That is bananas.
It's true.
So he's not allowed to show images in case the shoplifters complain?
You can't say, this is, look out for this one.
So that's the end of the wanted poster then?
Exactly, because of...
It's complete. Well, I think this is a general problem in society generally. I think that people have less respect for authority. I think there's a perception the police aren't going to be that engaged with shoplifting. So that essentially gives a green light to people to say, or gangs or whoever, to say, actually, we're just going to go in and take what we want and
quite understandably, stores and employers are telling their staff not to tangle with the thieves in the shops, not to tangle with them in case they pull a knife on them or they get hurt and they won't be insured. So they basically have to stand back and watch it happen.
They literally just stand back. I've heard this so often. They will stand back because...
It's not worth it.
It's not worth it.
It's
not worth it. And then what happens is, particularly these gangs who just, like, literally, as I say, take all the drink off the shelves, you then see it for sale on Facebook, literally later that day, on Facebook Marketplace.
That's what they... that's how...
So if you want a cheap bottle of gin, Kate, go on Facebook Marketplace.
Why have you suggested I want a cheap bottle of gin?
You're right.
Or it winds up in corner stores. The gentleman that we're going to be talking to a bit later on the programme, who was probably Britain's most prolific shoplifter, largely driven by his need for drugs, I have to say.
I think a lot of it is, actually.
Yeah, it really is. But he's a completely reformed character now. And he'll be telling us that when he would completely clear a shelf of drink and run out of the store, he would go straight to the local corner shop and say, do you want some cheap booze? And they'd buy it off him. They would buy it. Yeah. So it's actually quite easy to fence this stolen material. Sure. Something else that gets people very hot under the collar, litter. 9 out of 10 streets in the UK now has a litter problem. 9 out of 10. Right. You compare that to countries like France, which is squeaky clean. They do not tolerate it.
France, I mean, they go through ups and downs. Well, we used to have this campaign, Keep Britain Tidy. In the 80s,
still there,
but it hasn't. I haven't seen heard much about it in the last few years. But I mean, that was quite a good campaign, I think.
It's part of a sort of general malaise, isn't it, that then feeds back into, I think, economic harm. Because when you're walking through the streets of London and you feel like it's filthy and downtrodden, it just makes everything feel like confidence isn't great. And it always strikes me when you travel that very often you see, you know, do not drop litter only in English. Yeah. And you think, why is it always only in English? What is it about?
Yeah,
I hate
you're right.
litter.
But you know, I hate litter. You're absolutely right. But you know that old campaign, Get Britain Tidy. Why don't we launch a new campaign? Why doesn't Good Morning Britain launch a campaign for Britain's tidiest town? And get everywhere doing a big competition to... do you know
it's a really good idea.
Very good idea.
I think the Keep Britain Tidy campaign, I refer to it because we all remember it, and it kind of made you aware of that as an issue.
It did. One of the problems, though, Kwasi, I've got to say, is that there are fewer bins around, sometimes because of security. If you're at a train station, you can wander around trying to find a place to put it. Streets, they're an issue. Bins aren't emptied as frequently.
They aren't. So I think the collection of litter, I think that's a big problem.
Well, nothing, just linking back to that first discussion about infrastructure and all of that.
Yes.
When councils want to put bins and park benches into places, they've got to go through a whole rigmarole around, you know, consultations, and different organisations have got to give their opinion.
For putting a bin in place?
Well, for all of this sort of stuff, because different organisations have opinions on what goes where.
If the bins are only collected, let's say, once a fortnight, what happens is they get overflowing.
Absolutely.
And that's the regularity, frequency,
and then you just look at it and think, you know.
And talking about dropping things, very, very quickly, are either of you particularly worried about this asteroid dropping on some pavement somewhere in 2032?
Got a few years.
There is a measurable chance.
I've seen so many scare stories.
You're not bothered.
And I remember actually in Bays, when I was Secretary of State, my department was responsible for UFOs, because it was under the science. So
really?
It was. That was one of the oddest moments.
Aliens,
no, if they came, the business Secretary of State, because we were in charge of science, or we were responsible for that. Was responsible for meeting them, or I don't know.
I always thought you were on a different planet, Kwasi.
That was an easy one.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, it's a long way off, even if it does strike. And apparently, we can send a rocket up to blow it up, just like deep impact.
I think we'll deal with it,
I feel like, Will Smith must be just around the corner.
Exactly.
Ready to save us all. Thank you.
All right, guys.